When you first find yourself diving into the world of PlayStation games, generally one of the #1 franchises you're told to check out is Naughty Dogs Uncharted. The frantic adventures of wisecracking Nathan Drake has sold millions of copies around the world, and so many people have fallen in love with this rogue, death-defying lunatic. And next February, I'm sure many more non-gamer people will fall in love with him when he's played by the best casting choice ever. Tom Holland. Yeah. He'll be perfect for 12-year-old Nathan. I played all of these for the first time in early 2020, so I thought it might be fun to go through each of the games and discuss the various aspects about their gameplay and especially story that led to my overall ranking. Because even though a majority of people probably say that Uncharted 4 is the best in the series, I've always personally considered that the best is Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. So therefore, I thought I'd go through each of the games and analyze why exactly that is. Why the various negatives stack up in a way that leaves Uncharted 2 mostly unscathed in my mind, while taking a look at why other people may feel differently. First off, we need to look at the 3 Uncharted games that were released during the PS3 era. These games are so influential that, in many ways, they are a major part of how, in the great console war of the 5th generation, the PS3 was just barely able to sneak out on top of the Xbox 360 in regards to sales at the end, plus Last of Us. One of the biggest things that I want to focus on is how the characters and stories enhance the player's investment on what's going on. Other people can string out 50 minutes talking about the mechanics of the gun inventory, and that's cool, but that's not me. I mainly want to talk about the cutscenes and dialogue that many people skip or ignore, and really dive into the character motivations and plot mechanisms that are shown within, because I'm a weirdo. The most unanimous opinion most people have on the series is that Uncharted 1 Drake's Legacy is far and away the worst, which I am definitely in line with. I would never call it a bad game, it's generally pretty fun to play, and its introduction to the characters is crucial to appreciating the rest of the franchise going forwards. But the gameplay, even though all of the usual Uncharted fare is here, is just so much more rough. The ideas are there, they just never felt polished enough to be satisfying. In fact, their closeness to great makes it more frustrating, particularly in the shooting sections. The story mostly does its part, and the best thing I can say about it is that by the end, Nathan Drake, Alina Fisher, and Sully are all impeccably personified, and when it was over, I couldn't wait to see what happened next with them. These are genuinely likable characters, and the voice actors bring them to life perfectly, especially Nolan North as Nathan. It definitely falters in the area of villains, though, on the basis that it can't really decide who the main one is. Eddie Raja is probably the most interesting because he actually has a personality and ends up having to fight alongside Drake before he dies, but the final boss just ends up being one of the henchmen of the main evil British guy, and it falls kinda flat.
Adios, asshole.
Plus, the game had me thinking it was mostly grounded and non-supernatural for the majority of it, and then at the 90% mark, a bunch of buff golems are going after me like I have their precious, and on my first playthrough, I got completely pulled out of it. When I replayed it, I was able to see the moments where they were vaguely set up, but either I was too dumb first go round and didn't notice the setup, or they needed to better establish that this is a world where that type of shit can happen. But that's the thing, Uncharted 1 had the burden of establishing all this stuff so that Uncharted 2 can take that platform and elevate it to the realm of greatness. Because that's exactly what it did. From the very first chapter, the gameplay feels immensely improved, the climbing feels more satisfying, and the shooting combat also has an enormous leg up. Just in general, it feels like there's more to do. The story and character stuff is also improved upon the first one. In terms of the overall narrative, you can argue that it's rather simple, especially compared to the later games. But honestly, I think that's why it works so well for me. It perfectly captures and modernizes the feel of the old-school adventural serial, and the gameplay in turn is able to flow into that structure perfectly. Additionally, because the quest for Shambhala isn't the most ridiculously complicated thing, there's so much more room to make the character and themes pop out even better. We get more of a definition of what drives Nathan forwards as a person, and we get an interesting mirror image of him in Harry Flynn. Harry Flynn stands as a representation of your generic thief, a badass, cold-hearted person that he's forced to reckon with throughout the story. Chloe Fraser also ties into this pretty well. She sort of shows how Nate can sink further into this tricky and untrustworthy life. She's introduced as the new girl of the installment in the way that movies like Indiana Jones and James Bond cycle through women, but then it actually subverts that by bringing the old girlfriend, Alina, back into the mix.
Nate? What the hell are you doing here?
The main question at play in Uncharted 2 is if Nathan can really fit into the complex world of thieves and explosions he positions himself in if he still tries to have a moral compass. Can Nathan Drake still be Nathan Drake when he's among thieves? Yeah, you can pull the ludonarrative dissonance argument and point to all the guys he kills.
Gotta get a gun. Now we're cooking. Anything yet?
But I think the game still does a pretty great job of balancing this, because Nate isn't about to kill some random security guards. He'll stealth around and make them pass out. But if a mob of terrorists led by a warlord sends their dudes after him, and if all he has is a gun to fight his way out, he's gonna have to get some headshots. Plus, the final battle addresses this, and the main villain is just such a pure evil guy that it feels justified tearing through hell to stop him. Nate had a scrappy life that pulled him into this profession, but at the heart, he kinda wants to be a hero. That's why in the end, he chooses Alina over Chloe. Chloe is badass and awesome, but ultimately, she represents something more complicated than who he fundamentally is. He rekindles his relationship with Alina because she's closer to the man that he's trying to be. And honestly, I think that really works. By the time Uncharted 2's ending rolls around, I just feel stunned. Some could argue it's dated in some ways, but for me, it's the absolute perfect adventure game with pretty much everything it tried to be.
We're terrified.
What's a 10?
Clowns?
Clowns over my death?
I hate
Clowns?
clowns. I hate clowns.
Oh my word. You thought I was dead.
Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception is an interesting place in the series, seeing it's wedged in between the two most beloved installments. As it stands, it's a really good game, but it definitely does not live up to its predecessor. The only element of gameplay that I felt was significantly improved would be the hand-to-hand combat. Just from the opening bar fight, it feels more satisfying in this game than the first two. The gunfire and the climbing are about the same, but for some reason I find it less engaging than in Among Thieves. But overall, the gameplay is pretty fun, super solid as usual. However, you know me, the main thing I want to talk about is the story of Uncharted 3, and in this case, that's where the flaws are most apparent. I do love everything that establishes how Nate first met Mark Wahlberg. The backstory where they find themselves in an M. Night Shyamalan film battling the trees was a unique twist for Drake's origin. Man, that casting really is fucking awful, right? Especially when the perfection of Bruce Campbell exists. For real though, I love how this game establishes early Nate and Sully, and why Nathan has grown to care about the man who lifted him out of the gutter, and taught him to survive in this cruel, thieving world. The theme of Nathan trying to prove himself against the elitist assholes who tried to belittle who he made himself into, the way he built himself up from the bottom, all of that stuff is great.
Greatness from small beginnings. Beneath that cocky exterior, you're still the same scared, filthy little runaway, aren't you?
The villains being the snooty British fox made them the most easy-to-hate villains in the entire series, in my opinion, and they are a fantastic adversary for the scrappy Nathan Drake. The biggest problem, overall, is just something that grows more apparent the further throughout the game someone goes. The plot just outright begins to copy Uncharted 2. The main quest for a lost city that winds up exploding is almost precisely the same as 2, with the only difference being hot desert instead of cold mountains. The plot of Alina and Nathan having a previous breakup is also completely recycled, and it's nowhere near as emotionally effective here. That's the biggest frustration of Uncharted 3. Even though a lot of the new stuff is good, it's not even close to being as engaging because it's conveyed through a story structure we already saw in the last installment. So yeah, even the straight up improvement to combat, there's nothing that can really convince me that Uncharted 3 is in any way more than a really fun, but ultimately hollow recreation of the predecessor. So that was the era of Uncharted originally released for the PS3. And overall, I really love these games. They were thankfully re-released for the PS4 as Nathan Drake's collection, so that's how I was able to experience them. But how is Naughty Dog able to expand Drake's world going forwards on their next console? Join me next time as I look at Uncharted, A Thief's End, and The Lost Legacy. Thanks for watching. I've never really covered games on this channel, and seeing that over the pandemic I've played more than I ever have before in my life, I figure it was time I started focusing on a new kind of topic. Anyway, I have more stuff headed your way, so please subscribe if you're interested in that. Now, if you excuse me, I'm just going to spend the end card complaining about Mark Wahlberg as Sully. Seriously, I have no idea why anyone thought that Marky Mark was the best choice for the wisecracking, cigar-smoking old rascal. I can think of several dozen actors off the top of my head that give me more Sully vibes, and Bruce Campbell is at the top of them. Like, holy shit. Tom Holland might grow into the role unless he's been genetically engineered to always look like a high schooler, but Mark Wahlberg? The guy even has a hate crime subdivision on the Wikipedia, for Christ's sake. So, yeah, this is... I'll try the movie out, and I don't know if the trailer comes out, who fucking knows, but I don't get it. I just don't get why they decided to go this way. Fuck.